there, and welcome to Hypersleep Voyager. Tonight we drift away from the solid ground we know so well, into a place where the light fades, and the world turns a deep, endless blue. From the surface, the ocean seems quiet, just a simple, shimmering reflection of the sky. But beneath that veil lies a hidden realm, a vast, unseen universe. It is an ancient mystery that hums with life. Even when the world above sleeps, this deep water works tirelessly, moving, breathing, carrying secrets from the dawn of time. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into the unknown, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, just breathe. Let the weight of the day drift away. Allow your eyes to grow heavy as we sink beneath the waves. Let's begin. Water exerts pressure that increases by 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters of depth. This weight is not a burden, it is a constant embrace. On land, the air touches you lightly, but here, the water holds you. It presses against every inch of skin and supports the chest. There is no need to stand upright as gravity loses its grip. You float in the center of the volume. The heavy blue layer acts like a thick blanket. It shields the deep from the chaos of the surface. Silence reigns here. The noise of the day cannot penetrate this density. Everything slows down. The rhythm of the current takes over. It is a reminder that being held tight creates a space for total release. You are safe within the heavy arms of the deep. Sound waves travel 4 times faster in water than they do in air. In the atmosphere, sound is a wave that hits the ear. Underwater, sound is a vibration that moves through the entire body. The liquid medium is dense. It carries the low hum of distant shifting plates. It carries the song of the whale across oceans. You do not just hear the sound, you feel it in your bones. It resonates in the chest cavity. The water connects everything. A single pause travels for miles without fading. It is an invisible web. The silence between the sounds is profound. It is heavy and thick. You could say that water erases the distance between living things. We are not separate observers here. We are part of the same conductive medium. The ocean turns the entire world into a single listening ear. Read light is absorbed by water molecules within the first 10 meters of the surface. The deeper you go, the more the spectrum fades. First the red disappears, then the orange, then the yellow. The visual world simplifies. It becomes a study in blue. The eyes rest from the sharpness of bright colors. Shadows lengthen and merge. The water acts as a filter, stripping away the unnecessary details. Only the essential shapes remain. The light does not strike hard here. It diffuses. It scatters gently. There is no glare to hurt the gaze. The darkness is not empty. It is filled with particles of marine snow. They fall slowly like dust in a quiet room. This reveals that darkness is not the absence of light. It is a softening of the world. It is a place where the mind can finally drift into the monochrome calm. Global ocean currents take approximately 1,000 years to complete a single circuit. This movement is too slow to see. It happens far below the waves. Cold, salty water sinks at the poles. It begins a long journey along the bottom. It creeps across the abyss. It It does not rush. It has no destination to reach quickly. This water carries oxygen to the deepest trenches. It flows with the patience of a mountain. Think of your own blood moving. This is the blood of the planet, but it moves with the pace of a sleeping giant. It is a rhythm measured in centuries. The water you touch today was last at the surface a millennium ago. In this sense, we see that true strength does not require speed. The most important things move slowly. They persist without effort. You can rest in the knowledge that the cycle continues. Many deep-sea organisms possess no hard bones and rely on internal fluid pressure for structure. They are made almost entirely of water. They do not resist the pressure, they become equal to it. A jellyfish pulses in the dark. It is a ghost of tissue. It has no sharp edges. It has no rigid frame to break. It moves by surrendering to the fluid. The boundary between the creature and the ocean is thin. They are one and the same. They drift without muscle tension. They do not fight gravity. They simply exist in suspension. Their bodies are transparent maps of the currents. They show us how to yield. You could say that rigidity is not the only way to survive. To be soft is to be unbreakable. By letting the water move through us, we become part of the vast, ancient stillness. A thermic line is a distinct layer in a large body of water where temperature changes more rapidly with depth than it does in the layers above or below. You drift down through the warm surface. Suddenly, you hit a boundary. It is invisible. Yet, the skin feels the change instantly. The cold is sharp but clean. It is a liquid floor. The water here is denser. It does not mix with the warmth above. It is in perfect stillness. You can float on this invisible line, suspended between two worlds. The heat of the day remains above. The cool preservation of the deep lies below. It is a quiet border. There is no wind to disturb it. It is a reminder that there are levels of depth within us. But we can sink past the active surface to find a colder, quieter place to rest. Sea water contains approximately 3.5% dissolved salts by weight. The salinity increases the density of the fluid. It creates a force called the ocean wants to lift you. It pushes upward against gravity. You lie back. The water takes the weight of your head. It takes the weight of your limbs. Muscles that hold you up all day can finally loosen. The spine decompresses. You are lighter here. The heavy salt acts as a cushion. It is ancient mineral. It is the same salt that is in your blood. The connection is chemical. You dissolve into the background. You are merely floating matter. In this sense, we see that the burden of gravity is temporary. There is a medium that is ready to carry the load. You only need to trust the water to hold you up. Marine snow consists of organic material falling from the upper layers of the water column to the deep ocean floor. These particles are small and white. They look like flakes in a winter storm, but they fall through the liquid. They descend for weeks. They drift past your face in the gloom. It is a slow rain of nutrients. The deep ocean waits for this gift. The bottom is far away. The journey is silent. There is no sound as they land on the sediment. They cover the abyss in a soft blanket. It creates a landscape of quiet dust. Everything is reused. The surface feeds the depth. The cycle is unbroken. You watch the flake spin and settle. You could say that nothing is ever truly lost or wasted. Even in the deepest dark, there is sustenance falling slowly from above. The abyssal plane covers more than 50% of the Earth's surface. It is a vast, flat expanse of sediment. It is the largest habitat on the planet, yet it is unseen. It stretches out in the eternal dark. There are no trees. There are no mountains here. Just endless, soft mud. It is a desert of water. The pressure is immense. The temperature is near freezing, but it is stable. It has not changed for millions of years. It is a place of absolute consistency. The chaos of the land does not reach here. The storms do not disturb the silt. It is a wide open room. It waits in patience. This reveals that the foundation of the world is not chaotic. It is a calm, dark plane that sits quietly beneath all our noise. Water has a high specific heat capacity, meaning it absorbs a lot of heat before its temperature rises. The ocean acts as a massive thermal battery. It drinks the heat of the sun. It does not get hot quickly. It remains cool and steady. You can touch the surface at noon and it is still refreshing. It swallows the energy of the day without changing its nature. It stabilizes the air. It keeps the world from overheating. This vast body of the liquid creates a temperate home. It works silently. It buffers the extremes. It creates a balance. The heat goes into the depths and disappears. The water remains unchanged. It is a reminder that we can absorb the energy around us without losing our cool. We can contain the heat and remain steady. The depth is large enough to hold it all. Bioluminescence is the production and emission of light by a living organism. In the deep ocean, sunlight does not exist. The only light comes from within. A small creature drifts by. It flashes a soft blue signal. It is a cold light. It produces no heat. It is a single point in the void. It does not try to light up the whole sea. It only illuminates its immediate path. Other lights answer in the distance. They form constellations in the water. They blink and fade. The darkness returns, but the memory of the light remains. It is a gentle rhythm. It is a language of pulses. You could say that the deepest arc is not fearsome. It is simply a canvas for a different kind of light. A quiet glow is enough to navigate the vastness. Hydrothermal vents release geothermally heated water from the Earth's crust. These are chimneys on the ocean floor. The water around them is freezing, but inside the column it is hot. It carries minerals from the center of the Earth. Dark plumes rise slowly. It spreads out like a cloud. It warms the surrounding deep. Life gathers here. Crabs and worms rest near the heat. They do not need the sun. They rely on the warmth of the planet itself. It is an oasis in the cold. The Earth is breathing here. It exhales heat into the ocean. It is a slow, steady release. In this sense, we see that warmth can be found in the most unlikely places. Even at the bottom of the world, there is a hearth burning. We are never truly far from the fire. The total volume of the ocean is approximately 1.3 billion cubic kilometers. The The scale is impossible to hold in the mind. It is a world of volume. You are a microscopic speck in this expanse. The water extends in all directions. Up, down, north, south. There are no walls. There are no ceilings. Just the endless blue gradient. It swallows all measurement. Your worries are small here. They dissolve in the sheer quantity of water. The ocean is too big to care. It is too old to hurry. It simply is. You float in the middle of this greatness. You are held by something infinite. This reveals that we are small parts of a massive whole. There's peace in being small. We can stop trying to control the tide, but we can simply let the volume surround us. The moon exerts a gravitational force that causes the ocean to bulge outward. This movement is the breath of the planet. The water rises along the shore. It fills the hollows of the rock. It lifts the heavy ships without effort. The tide creeps in silently. It covers the sand that was dry an hour ago. It does not hurry. It obeys a schedule set by a stone in the sky. The rhythm is absolute. You can count on the return of the water. It connects the beach to the orbit of the moon. It creates a pulse in the static earth. It is a reminder that we are moved by forces far beyond our reach. Even the heaviest ocean obeys a distant call. We can rest in the certainty of the return. Giant kelp plants can grow vertically at a rate of 60 centimeters per day. This is a forest that moves. The stalks are tall and sleek. They rise from the cold bottom to the sunlit top. They do not have stiff trunks. They sway with the surge. The leaves filter the light into shifting beams of gold. It is a cathedral of green. The water pushes the canopy back and forth. The forest accepts the push. It leans. It returns. It does not snap in the current. You float between the towers. The silence is green and thick. Life hides in the shadows of the leaves. In this sense, we see that strength is found in flexibility. To stand tall, one must be willing to bend. The forest survives because it yields to the flow. A whale fall on the seafloor supports a localized ecosystem for several decades. The giant form falls through the dark. It lands softly on the silt. It becomes an island of life in the empty plain. Creatures emerge from the mud. They gather to sustain themselves. The ending of one becomes the life of many. It is a slow transfer. The structure remains for years. It acts as a reef. The silence of the resting place is broken by the activity of survival. Nothing is wasted in the deep. The end is merely a beginning for the darkness. You could say that there is no true end to existence. We are simply borrowed matter. Eventually, we return our energy to the void to feed the future. Sea ice forms when the ocean surface cools to approximately 2 degrees below zero. The lid creates a ceiling of solid white. Below the ice, the water remains liquid. It is a protected room. The storms rush above. The wind blows across the frozen plain. But down here, it is still. The ice muffles the noise. It blocks the turbulence. The light filters through in blue shafts. It is a cold sanctuary. You drift beneath the floor of the world. The barrier is thick. It keeps the chaos out. The cold is a preserver. This reveals that isolation can be a form of safety. By closing ourselves off from the surface, we find a quiet space to endure. The ice keeps the peace intact. Toothed whales generate high-frequency clicks that bounce off objects to create a sonic image. Vision is useless in the murky deep. The creature sends out a sound. It waits for the return. The echo paints a picture in the mind. It sees the texture of the sand. It sees the shape of the fish. The world is built of noise and silence. It is a sense of touch that extends for miles. The water carries the message. The whale knows what lies ahead in the dark. It does not need light to understand its path. It listens to the shape of the world. It is a reminder that we can find our way without seeing. By sending out a signal and waiting for the answer, we map the unknown. The ocean absorbs approximately 30% of the carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. The water takes the weight of the air. It dissolves the gas into its cold currents. It changes the chemistry of the deep. The sea creates a balance for the land. It acts as a vast sponge. It holds the invisible byproduct of combustion. The burden is distributed across the globe. The molecules drift in the slow currents. The ocean does not complain. It simply accepts the load. It adjusts. It continues to flow. In this sense, we see the power of silent endurance. The water carries what we cannot hold. It processes the waste of the world in its deep, dark belly. A blue hole is a large marine cavern that extends vertically into the carbonate bedrock. From the air, it is a perfect circle of dark indigo. It sits in the turquoise shallows like an eye. You swim over the edge. The bottom drops away instantly. There's no gradual slope. There's only the plunge. The walls are vertically extended. The light fades quickly as you descend. It is a well of ancient water. The currents stop. The silence deepens. You are falling into the history of the earth. The cave holds secrets from a time when the sea was lower. You could say that the deepest journeys are the ones that go straight down. We must leave the shallow light to find the ancient truth hidden in the dark. Scattering of light by water molecules limits underwater visibility to a short distance. You cannot see the far horizon. The world ends in a soft blue gradient. Objects fade into the mist. A large fish appears from nowhere. It glides into the circle of sight. Then it vanishes back into the blue. The fog is constant. It travels with you. You are the center of a small, visible sphere. The rest of the ocean is hidden. There is no future to see. There is no past to look back at. There is only the immediate space around the body. This reveals that the present is the only reality. We do not need to see the end of the journey. We only need to see the water right before us. Low-frequency sounds travel much farther than high-frequency sounds in the ocean due to lower absorption rates. You hear the rumble. It is not a noise. It is a pressure in the chest. High notes die quickly here. They are absorbed by the water. Only the deep tones remain. They travel for thousands of miles. The ocean filters out the screech. It keeps the hum. You float in a world of bass. It feels like the earth itself is singing. The vibration moves through the skin. It settles in the bones. It is a heavy, slow pulse. The sharp noises of the surface are gone. It is a reminder that only the deepest things last. The sharp, high thoughts fade away. The low, steady truth remains to travel the distance. Drag is the aerodynamic force that opposes an object's motion through a fluid. You try to run in a dream. The legs move slowly. The water catches every movement. It wraps around the limbs. It demands energy. That if you stop fighting, the drag disappears. You become streamlined. You align with the flow. The water slips past the skin. There is no friction when you are still. The resistance is only there when you push against it. The fluid waits for you to stop. It holds you in place. It acts as a gentle brake. In this sense, we see that struggle creates its own resistance. When we stop fighting the current, the path becomes clear. We find peace in the path of least resistance. Gases dissolve into liquids in proportion to the pressure surrounding them. The air you breathe changes here. It enters the blood. It dissolves quietly under the weight of the water. Tiny bubbles vanish into the liquid red stream. You are a vessel of dissolved gas. The pressure holds it all in solution. It is a hidden chemistry. You do not feel the change. You only feel the heavy calm. The body adapts to the depth. It accepts the extra weight. You are saturated with the atmosphere. It hides within the tissues. This reveals that we can hold more than we realize. Under pressure, we absorb the environment. We carry the weight inside us, invisible and silent, until it is time to rise. Blue light penetrates deeper than any other color in the visible spectrum because it has the shortest wavelength. The world turns to indigo. The red is gone. The yellow is gone. There's only blue. It's around you like a mood. It paints the sand in the rock. Your skin looks gray. The water loves this color. It lets it pass deep into the void. It is a twilight that never ends. The eyes relax. There is no contrast to strain the vision. It is a soft, cool monochrome. The light is faint but pure. It touches the bottom. You could say that the deeper we go, the more uniform the world becomes. We lose the distraction of variety. We are left with a single counting shade of truth. The benthic boundary layer is the layer of water immediately above the sediment at the bottom of the ocean. You reach the bottom, but the water here is different. It drags against the mud. It moves slower than the currents above. It is a distinct zone. Friction lowers the flow. The particles hang in suspension. It is a foggy carpet. You hover just above the silt. The water is thick with history. It protects the floor. Turbulence dies here. The storm on the surface is a myth. Down here, the water clings to the earth. It is a reminder that there is a place where movement finally stops. Close to the foundation, the friction slows us down. We find a quiet layer to rest just above the solid ground. Surface tension creates a barrier strong enough to separate the aquatic environment from the atmosphere. You float up. Your head bumps the ceiling. It is not glass. It is water. It bends around the skull. It tries to keep you down. It is a thin, elastic sheet. You break through. The air rushes in. You sink back down. The hole seals itself. The mark vanishes. The ceiling is perfect again. It is a self-healing roof. It separates the noise of the air from the silence of the deep. You watch the ripples fade. This reveals that the boundary between worlds is flexible. It yields to our passing, but always returns to its shape. We are protected by a resilient, silent skin. Water requires more energy to change its temperature than almost any other substance on Earth. The sun beats down. The air glows. But the ocean remains cool. You slip into the water. The heat is stripped away instantly. The fever breaks. The water is a massive sink for energy. It swallows the fire without flinching. It stays constant. Day turns to night. The air freezes. The water stays warm. It refuses to change quickly. It is stubborn. It hugs the body with a steady temperature. You are insulated from the swings of the weather. In this sense, we see the value of consistency. The deep does not react to every shift in the wind. It holds its own warmth and keeps its own cool. An object immersed in a fluid experiences an upward force equal to the weight of the fluid it displaces. You step off the ledge. You do not fall. The water catches you. It pushes back. It measures your volume. It offers an exact amount of support. You occupy space. The ocean acknowledges this. It makes room for you. The heavy feeling of the body vanishes. You are cradled by the math of the universe. The liquid fits perfectly against the skin. There are no gaps. You are held by the displacement of the sea. You could say that simply taking up space is enough to be supported. We do not need to earn our place. The world naturally rises to meet us and hold us up. Deep-sea gigantism causes species in cold water to grow significantly larger than their shallow relatives. The extreme pressure and low temperature change the rules of biology. Metabolism slows down to a crawl. The heart beats less often. Without the frantic need for speed, the body has time to expand. A spider crab stretches its legs wide in the dark. An isopod grows to the size of a football. They move with the dignity of heavy things. There is no rush to find food. There's no rush to mate. They simply exist and grow. They fill the empty space with their own volume. It is a reminder that slowing down allows us to become greater. By reducing the pace of our lives, we make room to expand into our true size. The Ekman spiral is a structure of currents or winds near a horizontal boundary in which the flow direction rotates as one moves away from the boundary. The wind pushes the surface water, but the water below does not follow exactly. It turns slightly to the side. The layer below that turns even more. It is a spiral staircase of water. The current descends into the deep, twisting as it goes. The movement on the surface is not the movement of the deep. You drift in the lower layers. The storm above pushes east, but down here you flow south. You are disconnected from the immediate force. This reveals that we do not have to follow the direction of the wind. Deep down, we can move by our own different compass. Chemosynthesis is the biological conversion of one or more carbon-containing molecules into organic matter using the oxidation of inorganic compounds. In the deepest trenches, the sun is a myth. Life here does not look up for energy. It looks down at the rock. Bacteria eat the chemicals seeping from the crust. They turn compounds into food. They build life out of sulfur and iron. is a closed loop. They do not need the sky. They carry their own source of power. They thrive in the absolute black. You could say that light is not the only source of life. Even in the darkest moments, we can find the energy to survive. We can build what we need from the very ground we stand on. A seamount is an underwater mountain rising from the ocean seafloor that does not reach to the water's surface. These are the hidden peaks of the world. They stand tall in the abyss. No ship ever sees them. No bird lands on them. The currents hit their sides and rise. This brings cold, rich water up from the bottom. Life gathers around the slopes. The mountain creates a sanctuary in the open water. It is a silent giant. It disrupts the flow without breaking the surface. It changes the ocean simply by standing still. In this sense, we see that true greatness does not need to be visible. You can support an entire ecosystem without ever showing your face to the world. Turbidity currents are rapidly moving. Sediment-laden water flows moving down a slope. Imagine a movement underwater. But it does not crash. It flows like a heavy liquid. Dust and mud mix with the water. The cloud becomes denser than the sea. It slides down the continental shelf. It moves in slow motion. It bears the cables on the floor. It reshapes the canyons. It is a river of earth flowing inside the ocean. It creates a new landscape in the dark. The dust settles miles away from where it started. It is a reminder that sometimes the ground must shift to find a new balance. The collapse is not a disaster. It is a slow movement toward a more stable resting place. Siphonophore appears to be a single creature, but it is actually a colony of thousands of individual zooids. They drift as a long, thin rope in the water. Each part has a job. One part eats. One part swims. One part reproduces. They are physically attached. They cannot survive alone. They share a single nervous system. They share a single stomach. It is the ultimate cooperation. The individual disappears into the whole. They float together through the void. They rely entirely on the strength of the chain. This reveals that unity is a form of survival. We are not meant to drift through the vastness alone. We are stronger when we are connected, part of the single moving thread. Upwelling is a process in which deep, cold water rises toward the surface to replace water that has been displaced by wind. The ocean turns itself inside out. The bottom water is old. It is full of nutrients from the past. It rises slowly to the light. It brings sustenance to the surface. The plankton bloom where the cold water hits the sun. The cycle is vertical. The depth feeds the shallows. The cold supports the warm. Without this rising, the surface would be a desert. You could say that we need to dip into our own depths to find nourishment. The things we bury deep inside are often the dirty things that will help us grow when they finally rise to the light. The residence time of water in the deep ocean can exceed several thousand years before it returns to the atmosphere. A drop of water sinks at the pool. It leaves the air behind. It travels across the bottom of the globe. It sees the history of the world pass by above it. It forgets the sun. It becomes part of the heady dark. It moves through the trenches. It is in no hurry to return. is on a long, silent pilgrimage. When it finally rises, it is ancient. It carries the memory of the abyss. It is a reminder that patience is the nature of water. We do not need to rush through the cycle. We can take our time in the deep, moving slowly through the dark before we rise again. Water molecules in a deep water wave move in a circular orbit, returning to nearly their original position after the wave passes. You watch the swell approaching. It looks like a wall of water moving forward, but the water itself is not traveling. It is only the energy that moves. You float in the path of the wave. It lifts you up. It carries you forward slightly. Then it lowers you down and pulls you back. You end up exactly where you started. The ocean breathes under you. You are rocked in a cradle of motion. You do not go anywhere. You simply ride the circle. It is a reminder that we can let heavy things pass through us without being moved. The energy travels on. We remain in our center. The lateral line is a system of sense organs found in aquatic vertebrates, used to detect movement and vibration in the surrounding water. Fish do not need to touch to feel. They sense the pressure wave of an approaching object. You close your eyes in the deep. You feel the water push against your skin. It tells you where the rocks are. It tells you where the current flows. You are not blind in the dark. The water acts as an extension of the body. You feel the presence of the world before it reaches you. It is a distant touch. The fluid connects the observer to the object. You could say that we are never truly separated from our environment. The water carries the truth of the world directly to our skin. The wave base is the maximum depth at which a water wave's passage causes significant water motion. A storm rages on the surface. The wind whips the white caps. But you dive down. You pass 10 meters. You pass 20 meters. Suddenly, the pulling stops. You have crossed the invisible line. The water here is unaffected by the weather above. It does not know that there is a storm. It is perfectly still. You hang in the quiet void. You look up at the chaos, but you do not feel it. The activity is shallow. The peace is deep. In this sense, we see that the turbulence of life is only a surface layer. If we go deep enough, we find a place that the storm cannot touch. Slack water is a short period in a tidal cycle when the body of water is completely unstressed and there is no movement either way. The tide stops coming in. It has not yet started to go out. The ocean holds its breath. The seaweed stands straight up in the water. The particles of sand stop rolling. The entire world pauses. There is no current to fight. There is no drift to correct. It is a moment of absolute equilibrium. The forces of the moon and the earth are balanced. You float in the suspension of time. This reveals that the pause is just as important as the movement. There is a quiet space between every breath where we can simply rest. Laminar flow occurs when a fluid flows in parallel layers with no disruption between the layers. The water moves like sheets of glass sliding over one another. There is no turbulence. There is no mixing. It is efficient and silent. You glide through the liquid. It does not churn around you. It parts smoothly. It reassembles behind you without a ripple. The path is clean. The energy is not wasted on chaos. The water knows where it is going. It travels in a straight, calm line. It is a river of order. It is a reminder that movement does not have to be a struggle. We can move through the world with a quiet, smooth intent, disturbing nothing. Many pelagic organisms have a refractive index that matches the surrounding seawater, rendering them nearly invisible. You look into the water. It appears empty, but it is full of life. A creature drifts by. You only see it when it moves. It is made of the same optical substance as the ocean. Light passes through it without bending. It casts no shadow. It hides in plain sight. It does not need a cave. It wears the water as a cloak. It has erased the boundary between itself and the world. You look right through it. This reveals that the best way to be safe is to become like your surroundings. We find peace by letting the light pass straight through us. Brine pools are areas of brine on the ocean basin that have a salinity 3 to 8 times greater than the surrounding ocean. It is a lake at the bottom of the sea. The heavy water sits in a depression. It has its own shoreline. It ripples. You can float a submarine on its surface while being underwater. It is a dense, separate world. It does not mix with the ocean above. It preserves whatever falls into it. It is a time capsule. The water is ancient and undisturbed. It sits in a bowl of rock. It waits in the dark. You could say that there are layers of depth we have not yet found. Even at the bottom, there is a deeper place to sink onto. The deep scattering layer is a layer in the ocean consisting of a variety of marine animals that was discovered through the use of sonar. The sound waves hit this layer and bounce back. It looks like a false bottom, but it is not rock. It is life. It rises at night. It sinks at dawn. It is a breathing soar. It protects the abyss from the surface. It is a cloud of biology. The sonar cannot see past it. The ocean keeps its secrets hidden behind this living curtain. It creates a boundary of noise and life. It is a reminder that what we think is the bottom is often just another layer. There is always more depth waiting beneath the crowd. Most bony fish possess a swim bladder, an internal gas-filled organ that allows them to control their buoyancy without wasting energy. A fish does not need to swim to stay afloat. It simply exists. It adjusts the air inside its body to match the heavy water outside. It finds the exact point of balance. It hangs motionless in the blue. The fins are us. The tail does not beat. The fish becomes a fixed point in the drifting current. It waits. It watches. It is perfectly calibrated to its depth. The pressure of the ocean is neutralized by the pressure within. In this sense, we see that stability comes from an internal adjustment. We do not need to fight the gravity of the world. We only need to find the right balance inside ourselves to rest in the suspension. Evaporation is the process by which water changes from a liquid state to a gas or vapor. The surface of the ocean is constantly lifting. It is a slow, invisible exit. Molecules break free from the heavy blue sheet. They rise into the air. They leave the salt behind. The ocean gives itself to the sky. It happens silently. You cannot see the water leaving, but the clouds form above. The cycle is vertical. The heavy liquid becomes a light mist. It travels on the wind. It floats over the land. It is a transformation of weight into spirit. It is a reminder that letting go allows us to rise. By releasing our hold on the heavy things, we can ascend into a lighter, freer form. Schooling fish move in synchronized patterns by reacting to the movements of their nearest neighbors rather than following a leader. A wall of silver moves through the water. It turns as one body. There is no command given. There is no delay. One fish turns and the neighbor turns with it. The reaction travels instantly. They move like a fluid within a fluid. The individual disappears. There is only the school. They flow around a larger presence like water around a rock. They merge and separate. They are a single mind made of thousands of bodies. You could say that the individual finds safety in the collective flow. When we move together, we lose the fear of being alone. We become part of a larger, smarter organism. Deep water corals grow extremely slowly, with some individual colonies living for over 4,000 years. They sit in the absolute dark. They are far below the waves. They do not need the sun. They build their skeletons atom by atom. They filter the black water for food. They add a millimeter of height every decade. They are the oldest living things in the sea. They have stood in the silence since the pyramids were built. They do not rush. They do not compete. They simply endure. The currents pass over them. The history of the world changes above them. They remain. This reveals that life does not need speed to be meaningful. To stand in one place and grow slowly is a victory of endurance. A sphere is the strongest geometric shape for resisting the immense external pressure of the deep ocean. The submersible descends into the trench. It is a perfect ball of steel. The water presses in. It pushes against the top, the bottom, and the sides. The force is equal from every angle. The sphere does not buckle. It distributes the burden evenly across its surface. There are no weak corners. There are no flat sides to yield. The shape creates strength through unity. It creates a small, safe room in the center of the crushing weight. It is a reminder that a quality of pressure creates stability. When we accept the weight of the world from all sides equally, we become unbreakable. Biofluorescence occurs when an organism absorbs blue light from the ocean and ray emits it as a different color. The light hits the skin of the creature. It is high energy blue. The creature takes this energy, holds it for a moment. Then it releases it as a soft green glow. It changes the nature of the light. It creates a secret color in a monochrome world. The ocean is blue, but the life is neon. It glows in the shadows. It signals to others of its kind. It transforms what it receives into something new. In this sense, we see that we have the power to change the energy that hits us. We can take the cold light of the world and turn it into our own warmth. Humans have no specific receptors on their skin to detect wetness. The sensation is merely a mix of pressure, texture, and temperature. You dive in. The water covers you. You feel the cold shock. You feel the weight of the liquid, but you do not feel wet. The sensation of when you leave the water, it comes when the air hits the skin. Underwater, the water is total. It is the only reality. You are not separate from it. You are part of the medium. The the boundary dissolves. The mind forgets the dry world. You could say that total immersion makes the medium disappear. When we are fully inside the moment, we no longer judge it. We simply exist within it. The continental slope is the steep descent of the seabed from the shallow shelf to the abyssal zones. You swim over the white sand. The bottom is clear and bright. Then the floor vanishes. The blue water turns to black. The ground drops away into the deep. It is a cliff that goes down for miles. There is nothing below you but depth. It is the edge of the known world. The comfortable shallow ends here. The true ocean begins. It is vast and indifferent. You hover on the precipice. You look down into the mystery. This reveals that the deep truth is always just over the edge. We must be willing to leave the shallow ground to understand the full depth of the world. Solid water is less dense than liquid water, causing ice to float rather than sink. This is a rare anomaly in physics. If ice behaved like other solids, it would sink to the bottom. The oceans would freeze from the floor up. Life would be trapped in the dark. Instead, the ice stays at the top. It forms a shield. It keeps the liquid water warm enough for life to endure. You walk on a frozen lake. You are walking on a floating roof. The depth below is protected by the lightness of the surface. This reveals that rising above the heavy depth is a form of protection. By staying light, the ice guards the deep, warm heart of the world. Water is known as the universal solvent because it dissolves more substances than any other liquid. Given enough time, water will break down anything. It softens the jagged rock. It smooths the rough edges. It steals iron from the mountain. It does not use force. It uses patience. It surrounds the hard object. It waits. It gently loosens the bonds of the material. The stone eventually becomes sand. The sharp edge becomes a curve. The ocean is a soup of dissolved history. It holds the mountains in liquid form. It is a reminder that softness ultimately triumphs over hardness. We do not need to strike to make an impact. We only need to flow and persist. Countershading is a form of camouflage where an animal's dorsal side is dark and its ventral side is light. The large fish swims in the open blue. You look down at it from above. Its dark back blends into the deep shadows. It disappears into the abyss. You look up at it from below. Its white belly blends into the sunlit surface. It disappears into the light. It is invisible from both directions. It does not hide behind a rock. It hides within the light and the dark. It balances the two on its own skin. In this sense, we see that fitting in is about aligning with your perspective. By carrying both the light and the dark, we become one with the environment. The Hadal's own creates the deepest habitats on Earth, located within V-shaped oceanic trenches. This is the basement of the planet. It is far deeper than the abyss. The walls of the trench rise up on both sides. The pressure is immense. The isolation is absolute. It is a canyon in the crust of the world. Yet, life is here. Tiny creatures move in the silt. They're the most remote living things on Earth. They're safe in the deepest crack of the floor. No storm can reach them. No light can disturb them. You could say that the lowest point creates the deepest cradle. When we hit the absolute bottom, we find a place of perfect, undisturbed safety. Rusticlasts are formations of iron-oxidizing bacteria that consume the metal of sunken ships. A steel hull rests on the sand. It was built to resist the ocean. Now it is being transformed. The bacteria form structures that look like rusty icicles. They slowly dissolve the iron. The ship is melting back into the water. The sharp lines of the vessel are gone. The metal becomes organic. The artificial becomes natural again. The ocean does not tolerate permanence. It reclaims everything. It turns the structure into food. It is a reminder that nothing we build is forever. Eventually, even the strongest steel surrenders to the slow appetite of the sea. Marine organisms extract calcium and carbonate ions from the water to construct their shells. A clam sits in the mud. It pulls invisible minerals from the liquid. It builds a stone house out of the water. Layer by layer, the shell hardens. It creates a fortress from the soup. The soft creature manifests a hard wall. It carries its home on its back. The barrier is made of the ocean itself. The water provides the very thing needed to protect against the water. This reveals that the solution to our vulnerability is often floating right around us. We can build our own safety from the invisible resources of the environment. Tidal friction caused by the movement of the oceans is gradually slowing the Earth's rotation. The water drags against the seabed. It acts as a massive brake. It resists the spin of the planet. The day is getting longer. A billion years ago, the day was shortened fast. Now the ocean has stretched it out. It calms the spinning rock. It demands a slower pace. The water creates time. It adds a fraction of a second to every century. It is a gentle, constant resistance. In this sense, we see the power of a slow, heavy influence. The ocean is teaching the earth to relax. It is slowing down the frantic spin of the world into a calmer rhythm. Internal waves are massive gravity waves that oscillate within the ocean rather than on the surface. You look at the sea, it seems flat. At 100 meters down, a giant wave is moving. It travels along the boundary of cold and warm water. It can be taller than a skyscraper. It moves silently through the dark. It mixes the nutrients. It pushes the submarine. It is a hidden power. The surface does not show the movement. The real movement happens deep inside. The visible world is deceptive. You could say that the biggest changes often happen where no one can see them. We contain vast movements within us that never break the surface of our skin. Cetaceans engage in uni-hemispheric slow wave sleep, allowing one half of the brain to rest while the other remains alert. The whale does not stop swimming to sleep. It simply closes one eye. The corresponding side of the brain shuts down. It enters a deep, quiet state. The other eye stays open. It watches the dark water for change. The body continues to rise for air. It is a shared duty between the hemispheres. The mind takes turns resting. There's never a moment of total vulnerability. The creature drifts in a state of half-dream. It is a seamless transition. The consciousness does not blink out, it merely dims. It is a reminder that we do not need to stop completely to find peace. We can find rest even while we are moving through the dark. The oceanic pole of inaccessibility is the point in the ocean that is farthest from any land. float in the center of the South Pacific. The nearest human is on the space station orbiting above. There's no boat on the horizon. There is no island. Just thousands of miles of shifting blues. The isolation is absolute. The radio is silent. You are the center of a massive water hemisphere. The world of men is a distant memory. The silence here is not empty. It is heavy with space. The water stretches out to hold you. You are safe in the middle of nowhere. In this sense, we see that solitude is not loneliness. It is a vast room where the self can finally expand without limits. Polymetallic nodules on the deep ocean floor grow at a rate of only a few millimeters every million years. They small stones, it's in the clay. It pulls metal from the water, atom by atom, layer by layer. It grows in the absolute dark. It witnesses the shifting of continents. It feels the cooling of the earth. It is in no hurry. It builds itself over eons. It is a pearl of the abyss. The clock of the surface does not apply here. The growth is too slow to measure. It's in a silence that lasts for ages. It becomes heavy with time. You could say that true growth is invisible to the watching eye. The most enduring things are built in the quietest moments. Precipitation over the ocean accounts for approximately 78% of global rainfall. The clouds open up. Fresh water falls from the sky. It hits the salt water. For a moment, the drops are separate. They sit on the surface. Then they mix. The rain disappears into the waves. The drop returns to the source. The cycle closes. The surface is pitted with millions of tiny impacts. It is a liquid drum. The ocean rinks the sky. It accepts the return of its own vapor. The water is reunited with the whole. It is a reminder that all things eventually return to where they began. We are not separate from the whole. We are just rain waiting to fall back into the sea. High-fidelity is an isolated underwater volcanic mountain with a flat top over 200 meters below the sea surface. Once, this was an island. It stood in the sun. The waves are on at the peak. They made it flat. Then the ocean crust cooled and sank. The mountain went down. Now it sleeps in the twilight zone. It is a drowned table. The coral remembers the light. The stone remembers the air. It rests in the deep, perfectly level. The currents sweep across its plateau. It is a monument to a former life. This reveals that even mountains must bow to the water. There is dignity in sinking. We can carry our history with us into the deep and find a new place to rest. A sinking object reaches terminal velocity when the force of drag equals the force of gravity. You let go of the weight. It flows. At first, it speeds up. Then, the water catches it. The acceleration stops. It settles into a constant speed. It does not rush. It descends with a steady rhythm. The forces are balanced. The water manages the fall. It prevents the impact. The object glides down into the dark. It is held by the resistance. It travels at the exact speed the ocean allows. It is a state of equilibrium. In this sense, we see that falling is not always a chaotic descent. When we stop resisting, we find a steady, safe for them to travel downward. The Sargasso Sea is the only region of the ocean that has no end boundaries, defined instead by ocean currents. It is a sea within a sea. It is wrapped in a spinning wall of water. The weeds drift here. They form golden mats on the surface. The water is still and clear. It is a sanctuary in the open Atlantic. The currents rotate around it. They protect the center. The storms pass by on the outside. The calm remains on the inside. It holds its position without a shore. It relies on the flow to define it. You could say that we can create our own sanctuary. We do not need walls of stone. We can build a safe place out of the movement of our own lives. Sea foam is created by the agitation of seawater containing high concentrations of. The wave crashes hard. It mixes air into the water. The proteins catch the bubbles. High white lather forms. It floats on the heavy blue. It is soft and light. It cushions the impact of the sea against the rock. It trembles in the wind. It is the ocean made airy. The intensity of the crash creates something delicate. It sits on the sand like a cloud. It breathes with the tide. This reveals that turbulence often leaves softness in its wake. The hardest moments can create the gentlest results. We can find a soft place too, and even after the crash. The mammalian diving reef that triggers a physiological reduction in heart rate upon facial contact with cold water. You lower your head. The water meets the skin. Instantly, the body obeys the signal. The pulse slows down. The blood moves to the center. The anxiety of the air is cut off. The rhythm of the heart matches the slow rhythm of the deep. The humor. The water commands the calm. The biology takes over. It is a quiet shutdown of the noise. It is a reminder that peace is built into our very design. We are programmed to slow down when we return to the source. Cephalops utilize specialized cells called chromatophores to manipulate the pigment and texture of their skin. The octopus rests on the sand. It sees the pattern of the floor. It changes its own skin. The brown spots appear. The texture shifts from smooth to rough. It melts into the background. It becomes the floor. The boundary between the creature and the world vanishes. It does not hide behind a rock. It hides within the visible space. It creates safety by dissolving its own image. In this sense, we see that blending in is a form of rest. We find safety when we align ourselves completely with our surroundings. In the open ocean, its tsunami wave travels with a long wavelength and often passes beneath ships without being detected. The energy is massive. It moves at the speed of a jet, but on the surface it is invisible. The ship rises only inches. It falls gently. The crew feels nothing. The giant passes silently below the keel. It saves its height for the shore. Here it is just a pulse in the dark. It is hidden power. You could say that true strength travels without fanfare. The greatest forces in the world can pass right under us without disturbing our rest. Suspension feeders anchor themselves to a substrate and rely entirely on water currents to transport food particles to them. A sea fan stands on the reef. It does not hunt. It spreads its arms. It waits. The current flows through the mesh. The food arrives on the tide. There is no chase. There is no struggle. The ocean provides what is needed. The fan simply stays open. It trusts the flow. It exists in a state of constant receiving. This reveals that we can wait for what we need. We do not always have to pursue. We can stand still and let the current bring the sustenance to us. As sea ice forms, it expels salt from the crystal structure in a process known as brine rejection. The water freezes. The ice crystals lock together. They are pure. They push the heavy salt away. The solid is clean. The burden is left in the liquid below. The ice floats free of the impurity. It creates a pristine white shield. The chemistry sorts itself out in the cold. The structure refuses to hold what it does not need. It becomes light. It is a reminder that hardening allows us to purify. By setting our boundaries, we can release the things that weigh us down. Oceanic crust is denser than continental crust, causing it to slowly sink into the mantle at subduction zones. The floor of the ocean moves. It slides under the continent. It descends in the heat of the earth. It melts. The rock returns to the core. It is a slow burial. The old floor is consumed. It creates new space. The planet recycles its own skin. Nothing is permanent. The solid ground eventually flows like water. It is a cycle of millions of years. In this sense, we see that letting go is part of renewal. The old foundation sinks so that the new ground can rise. Shark skin is covered in microscopic structures called dermal denticles that channel water to reduce fluid friction. The traveler glides. It does not push the water. It invites the water to slide past. The rough skin quiets the flow. There is no wake. There is no sound. The movement is absolute. The shark arrives without announcement. It leaves without a trace. It is a shadow in the current. The resistance is gone. This reveals that texture can create silence. By refining our edges, we can move through the world with a total lack of friction. The acoustic signature of rain impacting the ocean's surface creates a broadband noise that dominates the underwater soundscape. You are 5 meters down. A storm breaks above. The drops hit the ceiling of the world. It sounds like static. It sounds like 1,000 tiny drums. The noise covers everything else. It wraps you in a blanket of white sound. The individual drops are lost in the hum. The world outside is silenced by the roar. It is a curtain of noise that isolates you in the deep. You could say that nature provides its own lullaby. The sound of the storm becomes a steady, soothing rhythm when heard from below. Capillary action is the ability of a liquid to flow narrow spaces without the assistance of external forces. You dip the corner of a cloth into the water. The liquid begins to climb. It moves upward against gravity. It soaks into the fibers. It fills the empty spaces. The water wants to connect. It drags itself up the threads. It does not need a pump. It only needs a narrow path. It creates a bridge between the wet and the dry. The moisture travels silently. It occupies the void. This reveals that the smallest spaces can create the strongest pull. We do not need to force the connection. We only need to offer a small, open path for the flow to enter. Seagrasses are the only flowering plants that grow and reproduce entirely while submerged in the marine environment. It is a meadow in the current. The grass is green and long. It waves back and forth. There is no wind here. There is only the tide. The blades out of the water. They do not break. They follow the rhythm of the ocean. The roots hold the sand in place. They stop the erosion. It is a quiet field. Fish hide in the stalks. The sun de-apples the floor. It is a reminder that we can bloom even when we are underwater. We can plant our roots in shifting sand and still find a way to grow. Baleen plates consist of keratin, the same fibrous protein found in hair arranged in cone-like mats. The whale opens its mouth. It takes in the ocean. A massive volume of water enters. Then the jaw closes. The tongue pushes up. The water is forced out through the bristles. The liquid leaves. The sustenance remains. The food is held on the inside. It is a massive filter. The whale does not chase. It simply processes the flow. It separates the essential from the excess. In this sense, we see that wisdom is the art of filtration. We let the vast noise of the world pass through us, and we keep only what nurtures us. Floating debris in the open ocean creates a localized ecosystem known as a rafting community. A broken tree floats in the blue. It is miles from land. It drifts without a course. But beneath it, life gathers. Small fish hide in the shadow. Barnacles attached to the wood. It is an island of life in the empty water. The driftwood supports the living. It offers a place to rest in the void. It moves with the current. It does not fight the direction. It is a traveling home. You could say that even when we are broken and adrift, we can still offer shelter. Our presence alone can be a refuge for others in the vastness. Mangrove roots possess a complex filtration system that excludes up to 90% of salt from the surrounding seawater. The tree stands in the ocean. The roots are tangled and thick. They sit in the mud. The tide rises around them. The water is harsh and salty, but the tree drinks only the fresh water. It blocks the salt at the gate. It survives in a place that overwhelms others. It creates a calm space between the roots. The water slows down here. The sediment settles. This reveals that we have the power to choose what we absorb. We can stand in the middle of the saltans, still drink only the sweet water. Submarine canyons are steep-sided valleys cut into the seabed of the continental slope, often deeper than canyons on land. A river of heavy sediment flows along the bottom. It carves the rock. It cuts a deep path in the floor. The walls are high. The sun is gone. The pressure is immense. The canyon funnels the water into the deep. It is a highway to the abyss. The walls channel the flood. It is a dark, silent valley. The currents are guided by the shape of the cut. It is a reminder that our deepest hollows can become channels for movement. The empty places inside us can guide the flow to where it needs to go. Sea spray consists of aerosol particles formed directly by the ejection of bubbles at the inner sea interface. The wave breaks. Here is caught below. A bubble rises to the top. It bursts. A tiny drop of ocean is thrown into the air. It catches the wind. It travels inland. the heavy water becomes flight. You smell the salt mounds from the shore. The ocean extends its reach. It becomes a mist. It touches the face. It is a transformation of state. The liquid becomes a breath. In this sense, we see that we are not bound to a single form. We can release the weight of our nature and take flight on the wind. And this is called eddies, are swirling currents that detach from the main flow and travel independently across the ocean basin. The river of water flows north. But a piece breaks off. It starts to spin. It forms a perfect circle. It holds a pocket of warm water. It drifts west. It is a private world. It carries its own temperature. It does not mix with the cold water around it. It spins slowly in the dark. It lasts for months. It is alone but stable. You could say that it is okay to spin away from the main path. We can hold on to our own warmth even when we are surrounded by a cold, vast ocean. Diatoms are single-celled algae that encase themselves in transparent cell. They live in houses made of glass. Millions of them drift in the upper layer of the sea. They are ornate and fragile. Yet, the glass is strong enough to protect the soft cell inside. The sun passes through the walls to feed them. They do not hide from the light. They allow it to enter their very structure. When they fade, the glass does not dissolve. It falls slowly to the bottom. It builds a floor of silica. It is a microscopic snow. This reveals that even the most fragile things can leave a lasting mark. We can build our own protection that remains long after we are gone. The spermous egg organ in the head of sperm whale contains a waxy substance that changes density with temperature. To dive, the whale cools cold water in. The wax hardens. The head becomes heavy. The whale sinks without effort. To rise, blood warms the wax. It melts. The head becomes light. The whale floats up. The creature controls its depth by changing its internal state. It uses the cold to go deep. It uses the warmth to find the air. It is a phase change of the body. In this sense, we see that we can adjust our own nature to match the journey. We can harden ourselves to sink into the work and soften ourselves to rise again. A shadow zone is an area in the ocean where sound waves bend away, creating a region of relative silence. The temperature and pressure curve the sound rays. They skip over a pocket of water. The submarine can hide here. The sonar pings pass above and below. The vessel is undetected. It sits in a blind spot of physics. The noise of the seeker does not reach it. It is a natural sanctuary. The ocean curves the search away. You float in the quiet void. You are safe from the search. It is a reminder that there are places where the noise of the world cannot find us. We can find a quiet angle where we are simply unreachable. A holdfast is a root-like structure that anchors aquatic plants to a solid substrate. The kelp does not have deep roots in the soil. It grips the rock. It holds on tight. The ocean pulls at the front. The waves try to tear it away, but the holdfast does not let go. It is a hand that never tires. It relies on friction and glue. It keeps the plant grounded in the storm. The rest of the body moves freely. It dances with the surge, but the anchor is stone still. You could say that we need a single point of stability to survive the chaos. If we hold on to one solid thing, we can weather any current. Flocculation is a process where fine particles clump together in water to form larger, heavier masses. They just float in the river. It is light. It travels far. But when it hits the salt of the ocean, the chemistry changes. The particles attract each other. They hug. They become a heavy flake. They can no longer float. They sink to the bottom. The ocean clears the water by bringing the dust together. The suspended cloudiness settles down. It becomes a solid bed of mud. This reveals that coming together creates weight. When we join with others, we stop drifting. We find the gravity to settle undressed. Turgor pressure is the force within the cell that pushes the plasma membrane against the cell wall. The seaweed stands upright in the water. It has no wood. It has no bone. It is filled with water. The pressure inside makes it rigid. It stretches the skin tight. It reaches for the sun. If the water leaves, the plant wilts. It collapses into a soft heap. The strength comes from being full. It comes from the inside pushing out. The ocean supports it from without, and the pressure supports it from within. In this sense, we see that we are kept upright by what we hold inside. Full spirit creates a strong stance. Total internal reflection occurs when light hits the water surface from below at a specific angle and bounces back down. You look up at the surface. You do not see the sky. You see a perfect mirror. The reef is reflected above you. The fish swim in the air. The water traps the image. It refuses to let the light escape. It keeps the beauty for itself. You are enclosed in a hall of mirrors. The boundary creates an illusion of infinite depth. There is no outside. There is only the blue. It is a reminder that the world we see is often a reflection of where we are. We are surrounded by our own perspective. Sponges are simple animals that rely on a constant flow of water through their bodies to obtain food and oxygen. The sponge sits on the reef. It does not move. It does not hunt. It pumps the ocean through its pores. The water enters. The nutrients are taken. The clean water leaves. It is a living sieve. It processes the world without chasing it. It trusts that the water will bring what is needed. It remains open. It does not close its doors. It lets the current pass right through its center. You could say that we do not need to grasp to receive. By remaining open and porous, we allow life to flow through us and sustain us. The compensation depth is the precise level in the ocean where the rate of photosynthesis, the sequels, the rate of respiration, is the balance point of the light. Above this line, there is growth. Below this line, there is darkness. But here, there is perfect equilibrium. The plant makes exactly enough energy to survive. It does not hoard. It does not fade. It hovers in the twilight. It exists on the thin margin between abundance and void. The water holds it in the zone of sufficiency. It is a quiet economy of life. This reveals that we do not always need excess to endure. There is a place of perfect balance where having just enough is plenty. An hydronic point is a geographical location within an ocean basin where the tidal range is RO. The tides of the world rotate around this hub. Miles away, the water rises and falls against the cliffs. But here, the surface is flat. The pivot point does not move. The storm spins around you. The moon pulls at the edges, but the center remains unaffected. It is the eye of the tidal storm. Float in the middle of the rotation. The chaos describes a circle around your piece. It is a reminder that every turning will has a still center. We can stand in the middle of the cycle and remain unmoved. Ampullae of Lorenzini are specialized sensing organs that allow certain fish to detect electric fields in the water. Vision is not needed here. You close your eyes. You feel the faint spark of life nearby. The heart of another creature beats. Its ends are pulsed through the salt. You feel it on the skin. The water acts as a wire. It connects the seeker to the hidden. The silence is full of signals. You do not need to touch to know you are not alone. The energy travels through the gap. In this sense, we see that connection transcends physical contact. You can feel the presence of others through the invisible currents that surround us. Certain echinoderms possess the ability to regenerate lost limbs through the proliferation of undifferentiated cells. If the body is lost, it drifts away, but the gap in the water does not signal the end. The creature rests. The cells begin to work. Slowly, the hour returns. The blueprint is stored within. The water supports the healing process. There is no scar. There is only renewal. The loss is temporary. The body refuses to be incomplete. It rebuilds itself from the core. You could say that we are designed to be whole. Even after a great loss, the potential for recovery remains written in our nature. A pincinal is a layer in a body of water where the density changes rapidly with depth. It acts as a liquid floor. You dive down and hit a wall of heavier water. It resists you. Debris settles here. It floats on the invisible line. It is too heavy for the surface, but too light for the bottom. It rests in the middle. The ocean is built of these shelves. Things find their specific gravity. They settle where they belong. The sorting is automatic. The water knows the weight of everything. This reveals that we all eventually find our level. We drift until we reach the layer that is dense enough to hold us up. Streamlining reduces the cross-sectional area of a body to minimize resistance as it moves through a fluid. The water sculpts the fish. It wears down the rough edges. It demands a smooth curve. If you resist the water with a flat surface, it pushes back. If you become round and taper, it lets you pass. The teardrop shape is born of efficiency. It is the shape of least resistance. The ocean shapes the dweller. You become slick to survive. You shed the unnecessary parts. It is a reminder that the environment shapes us for easy passage. We let go of our rough corners to move smoothly through the flow. For as ill ice consists of loose, randomly oriented ice crystals formed in supercooled, turbulent water, the river does not freeze solid. It turns into slush. The water becomes thick and heavy. It moves like oil. The crystals drift together. It is a state between liquid and solid. It is soft ice. It flows around the rocks. It muffles the sound of the stream. The sharp clarity of the water turns into a white haze. It is a slow transformation. The river is changing its skin. In this sense, we see that change is often a gradual thickening. We do not always freeze instantly. We move through a soft, slow transition. Sessile organisms are permanently attached to a solid substrate and cannot move freely. The barnacle chooses a rock. It emits itself to the spot. It gives up the ability to wander. It commits to the location. The tide brings the food. The waves bring the oxygen. The creature does not chase its desires. It waits for them to arrive. It stands firm in the surge. It trusts the ocean to provide. There is a deep strength in being fixed. I could say that we do not always need to move to find what we need. If we plant ourselves firmly, the currents of the world will eventually bring sustenance to our door. Nacre is secreted by mollusks in thin, concentric layers to isolate for irritants within the shell. A grain of sand enters the soft body. It is sharp and rough. The creature does not expel it. Instead, it covers the intruder. It wraps the grain in sheets of smooth crystal. Layer after layer is applied. The sharp edges are buried. The roughness is made round. The source of irritation becomes the center of a pearl. It is a slow process of coating. The defense mechanism creates a jewel. It turns the jagged rock into a sphere of light. In this sense, we see that we can handle the irritations of the world by softening them. We can wrap the sharp things in patience until they become beautiful. Magnetoreception allows sea turtles to detect the intensity and inclination of the Earth's magnetic field. The ocean has no road signs. The blue water looks the same in every direction. Yet the turtle knows the way. It feels the invisible lines of the planet. It follows a map written in the core of the earth. It swims with absolute certainty across the open void. The guidance comes from within. It does not need to see the shore to know where the land lies. It trusts the pull. It surrenders to the magnetic current. This reveals that we are never truly lost. There is a silent compass inside us that knows exactly where we need to go. The density of ice is approximately 90% that of liquid water, leaving the vast majority of its mass submerged. You see the white cliff floating on the sea. It looks massive, but it is only a fraction of the truth. The real mountain lies beneath the surface. It extends deep into the dark water. The base is wide and heavy. It stabilizes the peak. The visible part is supported by the invisible. The ice does not tip over. It is anchored by its own hidden depth. It moves with the deep currents, not the surface wind. It is a reminder that there's always more than what meets the eye. The deepest part of us remains hidden, keeping us steady in the waves. Ichthyosis is the process by which our theropods shed their rigid exoskeleton to allow for growth. The shell does not grow with the creature. It becomes a tight container. To get bigger, the crab must break out. It cracks the armor. It pulls its soft body from the hard casing. For a moment, it is exposed. It has no defense. It is soft and vulnerable in the cold water. But this softness is necessary. It is the only time the body can expand. The new shell hardens later. The risk is the price of size. You could say that we must be willing to be vulnerable to grow. We have to shed our old defenses to make room for who we are becoming. Boyle's law states that the pressure and volume of a gas have an inverse relationship. As you rise too fast from the deep, the air inside you expands. It becomes a risk. The bubbles grow in the blood. The body cannot adjust to the sudden change. To survive, you must ascend slowly. You must wait at every level. You let the pressure equalize. The ocean demands patience. It resists the rush. You have to respect the transition between the deep and the shallow. You breathe and wait. This reveals that the journey upward cannot be hurried. We must take our time to adjust to the changing atmosphere, or we risk losing our balance. Abrasion is the mechanical scraping of a rock surface by friction between rocks and moving particles. A shard of glass falls into the surf. It is sharp and dangerous. The ocean takes it. The waves tumble it against the sand. It is rolled over and over. The sharp corners are ground in. The cutting edge becomes a curve. Years pass. The glass becomes a frosted gem. It is soft to the touch. The motion of the wave has smoothed it. The constant friction polished the rough surface. In this sense, we see that the passages of life are just a tumbling process. The rough waters do not break us. They smooth our edges and make us whole. Estuaries are transition zones where fresh river water mixes with salty ocean water. It is a meeting of two worlds. The flow is not clear. The water is murky and swirling. The salt pushes in. The river pushes out. In this mixing, nutrients rise. It is the most fertile place in the sea. Life thrives in the interaction. The blend creates richness. It is neither a river nor an ocean. It is something new. The gradient allows for abundance. The stillness of the fresh water meets the power of the salt. It is a reminder that the meeting point of opposites is where growth happens. When we allow different worlds to mix, we create a space for life to flourish. Wave refraction is the bending of a wave as it propagates over different depths. The wave approaches the shore at an angle, but the bottom slows it down. The wave bends. It pivots. It aligns itself with the coastline. It wants to hit the land head-on. It adjusts its path to match the shape of the obstacle. It does not oppose the contour of the floor. It follows it. The water is flexible. It changes direction to meet the earth with grace. The energy is focused by the bend. This reveals that we can adapt our approach. We do not need to force a straight line. We can bend to meet the reality of the ground before us. The chamber of Nautilus grows by building a new, larger internal chamber and sealing off the old one. The creature moves forward. It closes the door on the past. The old rooms are sealed shut. They are empty of life. They are used only for buoyancy. The animal lives entirely in the newest, largest space. It carries its history as a heavy spiral on its back, but it never goes back. It stays in the present chamber. The shell expands to fit the growing body. It is a continuous journey outward. This reveals that we must close the door on what we were to become what we are. We carry our history, but we do not have to live in it. The remora fish possesses a modified dorsal fin that acts as a suction cup, allowing it to attach to larger marine animals. It finds a shark in the deep. It attaches itself to the rough skin. It stops swimming. It lets the giant do the work. The shark moves through the ocean with power. The remora travels with it. It uses no energy. It eats the remnants that fall. It is safe in the shadow of the larger body. It surrenders its own direction to the path of the host. It is a reminder that we do not always have to drive the journey. Sometimes the best way to travel is to attach ourselves to something larger and let it carry us. Osmosis is the movement of water molecules across a semi-permeable membrane to equalize the concentration of solutes on both sides. The water seeks balance. It flows from the pure side to the salty side. It wants to make things even. It crosses the wall of the cell without a pump. It is a passive force. The liquid pushes until the pressure is equal. It does not rest until the difference is gone. The difference dissolves in the slow flow. The barrier does not stop the movement. In this sense, we see that nature abhors a disparity. The water will always move to heal the division. We can trust the flow to bring things back to a state of level peace. During its development, a flatfish undergoes an metamorphosis where one eye migrates across the top of its head to the other side. The fish is born swimming upright, but it chooses the bottom. It lies down on its side. The body changes to match the choice. The eye moves. It travels across the bone of the skull. Both eyes look up. The fish becomes flat. It mimics the texture of the sand. It stops resisting gravity. It accepts the floor as its new horizon. This reveals that our perspective is not fixed. When we change our resting place, our vision shifts to match it. We can rearrange ourselves to see the world from a new angle. A neap tide occurs when the sun and moon are at right angles to each other, resulting in the smallest difference between high and low tide. The moon pulls the water one way. The sun pulls the water the other. The forces are divided. The ocean is caught in the middle of the sky's interaction. But the result is not chaos. The result is moderation. The high tide is lower than usual. The low tide is higher. The dramatic swing is reduced. The water stays close to the center line. It is a time of minimal change. The extremes cancel each other out. You could say that opposition can create stability. When the forces pulling on us are conflicted, we find a quiet middle ground. We rest in the balance of the motion. Reef-building corals harbor microscopic algae within their tissues that provide them with energy through photosynthesis. The stone animal cannot hunt enough food, so it keeps a garden inside. The algae live in the skin. They drink the sun. They feed the coral from within. The host protects the guest. The guest sustains the host. There are two beings living as one. The energy comes from the inside. The coral glows with the color of its helper. It creates its own sustenance while sitting still. It is a reminder that we do not have to face the dark alone, that we can carry our own light inside us. We are sustained by the hidden things we nurture. The coelacanth is a low-fined fish previously thought to be extinct, having remained virtually unchanged for 400 million years. The world above shifted. Continents broke apart. Dinosaurs rose and fell. The fish stayed in the deep cave. It did not evolve. It did not change its form. It kept the old ways. It swims slowly in the twilight. It is a ghost from the beginning of time. It refused the pressure to become something else. It simply endured while the earth changed. This reveals that constant change is not always necessary. There is dignity in staying the same. We can remain true to our original nature while the world turns around us. Echinoderms move using a water vascular system, pumping sea water into 2 feet to create hydraulic pressure. The starfish has no heavy muscles to tie around. It uses the water itself. It fills its internal canals with the ocean. The pressure extends thousands of tiny feet. They touch the rock, and they grip. Then the water is released. The foot retracts. It pulls the body forward. It is a movement made entirely of fluid mechanics. The ocean is the engine. The creature borrows the strength of the sea to take a step. In this sense, we see that we do not need our own rigid strength to move. We can let the environment fill us and drive us forward. We move by letting the water do the work. Constructive interference occurs when a wave crests meet and their amplitudes add together to form a single larger wave. You are floating in the trough. The ocean seems chaotic, but then 2 swells align. They come from different directions. They meet under you. You do not do anything. You simply rise. The water lifts you twice as high as before. The energy combines. The peak is momentary, but massive. Then the waves pass. You settle back down. The ocean separates the forces again. It is a temporary union of strength. This reveals that we are often lifted by forces we cannot see. When the rhythms of the world align, they carry us higher than we could ever go alone. See Siphonophores or cone jellies propel themselves using thousands of beating microscopic cilia rather than muscular contraction. They do not swim with effort. They shimmer through the dark. The cilia beat in a rhythmic wave. This movement breaks the light. It creates a rainbow that runs down the side of the body. They are not producing the light. They are fracturing it. They turn the faint gloom into color. They drift like silent prisms. The water moves gently around them. There is no sudden jerk. There is only a smooth, continuous glide. In this sense, we see that movement can be beautiful. By keeping a steady, small rhythm, we can transform the darkness around us into light. The visual horizon at sea is determined by the curvature of the earth, limiting the view to approximately 5 kilometers for an observer at sea level. You stand on the deck. You look out. The world ends in a sharp, flat line. The ocean meets the sky. You know there is more beyond the edge, but you cannot see it. The curve of the planet hides the future. You are in a circle of visibility. The rest is mystery. The limit is physical. It travels with you. You never reach the edge. It always recedes. It is a reminder that we are not meant to see everything. We are only responsible for the small circle of water that surrounds us right now. A tidal bore is a wave that travels up a river against the direction of the current caused by the incoming tide. The river flows down to the sea. It has done so for thousands of years. Today, the ocean presses in. A high wall of water enters the mouth of the river. It moves upstream. It ignores the natural flow. It climbs the channel. The water rises against the gravity. The river pauses. It swells. The fresh water is pushed back by the salt. It is a reversal of the natural order. You could say that sometimes we must go against the flow to find balance. The return journey sometimes requires us to push back against the current. Isostasy is the state of gravitational equilibrium between the Earth crust and the mantle, such that the crust floats at an elevation that depends on its thickness and density. The ocean floor is heavy rock. It sits on a layer of hot, soft stone. The floor presses down. The mantle yields. The earth adjusts to the weight. The basin sinks until it finds a balance. It is a slow settling. The solid ground is not truly fixed. It is floating on a deeper, hotter sea. The weight determines the depth. This reveals that everything is seeking its level. Even the heaviest weights eventually settle into a place of perfect support. Inertia is the tendency of an object to resist changes in its state of motion. You sit in a boat. You push against the dock. The boat is heavy. It refuses to move. You push harder. Slowly, it drifts. Now it is moving. You stop pushing. The boat continues. It glides across the glass. The water carries the momentum. It does not want to stop. The effort creates a lasting slide. A resistance to starting becomes a resistance to stopping. The energy is stored in the motion. In this sense, we see that the hardest part is simply beginning. Once we are in motion, the nature of the world helps us keep going. The albedo effect describes the fraction of solar energy reflected from the Earth back into space. Sea ice is white. The ocean is dark. The sun hits the ice. The heat bounces off. It returns to the sky. The ice remains cold because it refuses to absorb the heat. It acts as a mirror. It protects the ocean beneath from the heat of the day. The dark water drinks the heat, but the white ice rejects it. It stays frozen by saying no. It creates a boundary of reflection. It is a reminder that we can protect our cool center by reflecting the chaos. We do not have to absorb everything that hits us. Hermit crabs possess a soft, spirally curved abdomen which they protect by occupying the empty shells of other mollusks. The crab finds a shell on the sand. It inspects the opening. It slides its soft body inside. The fit is tight. The shell becomes part of the crab. It carries a home it did not build. It borrows safety from the past. When it grows too large, it must leave. It scuttles across the floor, unprotected and soft, to find a bigger room. It trades one safe place for another. This reveals that safety is often something we borrow. We can find comfort in structures that were built by others until we are ready to move on. And so, we drift to the end of our quiet journey through the suspended silence of the deep blue. Here, the immense weight of the water acts not as a burden, but as a vast, heavy blanket sealing out the chaotic noise of the surface world above. We have seen that even in the deepest shadows, life creates its own soft light. It is a gentle reminder that you, too, can find perfect stillness amidst the pressure. The ocean is vast enough to hold all your worries for you, allowing you to float, untethered and weightless, in the gentle current of the night. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. For now, there is nothing left to explore, nothing left to do. Just breathe. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let the underwater silence cradle your dreams. Good night.